everybody. Welcome back to the season finale of Housewives of Atlantic's. No, I'm just kidding. Welcome to the Revolution and Beer Show. RevolutionandBeer.com, and I'm pouring a beer the way it needs to be poured for my buddy Dave Orlikoff, activist and organizer down there, sitting next to Maddie Sullivan, also an activist and organizer, to continue our conversation on ALEC. But also on some other issues related to the economy, related to basically every aspect of our lives here that's being taken over and erased here. But I wanted to propose a toast again for the new show. We're talking. We're doing autumn beers. I've got a Serrano pepper beer. Dave, I just poured you a pumpkin ale. Yeah. Maddie, you're still on. You're on the coffee beer. Mm-hmm. You are. And we'll actually have some information about those specific beers you can find at revolutionandbeer.com or Revolution and Beer on Facebook. Like us on Facebook. There's a lot going on in the community. There's a lot that we cover. We'll let you know on what's coming up, activism-wise, that you can get involved, help make a difference. But also what's been going on will bring you to places that you might not have been able to get to, but things that are forgotten by the mainstream media, but are important to these communities, important to neighborhoods from all over Chicago. We're not just staying in one place. We're everywhere. We're in Inglewood. We're in Woodlawn. We're in Rogers Park. We're in everywhere. Everywhere that we're telling stories.
And we're trying to cover as many actions as we can, video-wise, too. And if you have a cause or anything that you're interested in that you feel like should get some coverage, you should let us know. And you can hit us up at info@revolutionandbeer.com. It's going to go to both of us. And let us know what your issue is. And or if you just want to talk about how shabby we look or something like that, it's fine too. We'll take it.
Or how buzzed we might be after doing 3 shows.
Do we do better, in the first part with less beer or the second part with more beer? Anything.
That's it. I'm W.C. Turk. This is my buddy, my partner, my co-host, Brian Murray. And I wanted to do a toast to you guys just to say thank you for hanging in there, sticking with us today. It's really important we hear your voices. They matter a lot to us. They're important voices. We picked you guys because of the strength and power of your voices. David, I know, Maddie, I've seen you at a number of protests and a number of actions. Dave, you and I go back a little ways, at the very least to Occupy.
He's a multimedia, multi-format.
A driver and an organizer.
Yeah, well, he's been around. I mean, he was with us on the radio a couple times and on WCPT,
And I mean this in a good way, but there's nothing particularly special about you except that you have. And bear me out.
Fantastic mustache.
Yeah, it is pretty awesome.
But that you have passion.
Yeah.
You have passion for your community. You have passion for your
I'll
fellow.
tell you what's special about me. I'm very lucky and very privileged, and I've just had the opportunity to confront, a lot of the problems that I see in the world. To try to live, according to what I think is just. So I can live with myself. I have, privilege. And I need to live my life in a way that I can live with myself.
So you don't take it for granted. Is what I think is important.
Which I think is the key. I think is the key to activism right now. Is can you live with yourself? And at the end of all this, which seems very fatalistic to me, but I'm a novelist, so I tell these really like broad, deep stories. At the end of all this, those last couple of breaths in your body.
I'm dying now?
Or
we have an announcement to make later.
Is did you change anything? Did you contribute anything? And not to a large corporation, not to your job, but to your fellow man.
Or did you just stand by when you saw injustice? Or did you actually speak out against it when you saw it? Did you take action against it? We all have to think about these things, and this is important. For whatever historical figure we want to follow, most of the ones that I respect and appreciate for people that put it on the line to a very significant degree to fight against injustice. So.
I don't
if
think
there's
you have
injustice
that
anywhere,
choice.
there's injustice everywhere.
I don't think people actually have the choice to choose, if they're going to have an impact in the world. You are going to have an impact in the world, But if your impact is...
It's a question of
right.
impact versus, conscious taking control.
Exactly.
Did you just passively have an impact because you were there, or did you consciously decide to actually engage and take up for something?
I mean, the impact can be very profound from not taking a conscious step, but it's profound in a profoundly negative way.
Yeah.
We're talking about Nazi Germany bystanders, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess, boy, there are different ways of approaching activism. One of the things I'll tell this story very quickly, and I'd love to get your guys' perspective on it. Is on July 4th, I was in Washington D.C. There was a gentleman, Adam Kokesh, who is disgruntled against the government and wants to
reasons for that.
Absolutely. And I don't fault Adam for that completely. The methodology. Yeah. What he was proposing was a march across the Memorial Bridge into Washington with 5,000 people with guns. Mm-hmm. What that illustrates, and I was there alone to stand in opposition to him, which people can find that video at revolutionandbeer.com, where we actually talked with a number of his supporters. And
not only were you going to be in opposition to him, but you were going to try to invite a discussion and a little bit of an exploration about of what he was trying to accomplish there, and that's and I think it's valid. I mean, when you take drastic moves, you should be challenged, and if you can't deal with that challenge, then you question, what your real beliefs are and how you actually, or how strongly you believe in them.
Yeah, and one of the things that bothered me most, and I see this, I see the opposite in you guys, but what he had done was, for so long he had taken a relative inaction, or he represented a relative disinterest in what was going on in the country, in communities, and culturally, politically, that all of a sudden, when he awakened to it, he couldn't see a better solution than a potential violence, a potential act of violence, which I thought was really antithetical to any sort of progressive movement, and that's why we were standing in opposition to him on that bridge was because of that sort of knee-jerk, foolish reaction. So I wanted to get your guys' impression or thoughts on the form of activism that's necessary in order to make change in this country. Go, man.
Just kind of commenting on, having 5,000 people showing up with guns. Like even in activist circles, when this action was being proposed, and he was asking, people to join him in this. The major talk was that he was bringing guns and that he was promoting violence. It wasn't, his message, what he was trying to get us across or stand for. It was mostly, he's bringing guns, he's promoting violence. What effect is this going to have on activism, in the future if he goes through with this? And I think violence on either side, especially when it's police against protesters or vice versa. I think at least with our mainstream media right now, I think it distracts from what you're trying to say. Or at least that's how the media proposes. Because then they show just it could be like 5 seconds where a protester is doing something, and then they say, "Oh, look, they're violent," and then your message gets lost.
So Dave, he was able to engage a lot of people that curiously never showed. I think 6 of them showed. Which was only 6. There was only 6 of them, which was a little bit of a relief to me.
A couple of them had to be fed.
Not to actually have to stand in front.
Really cut that down to like 4.
Yeah. But what gets people involved? What gets people in the streets? What do you feel is...
What gets people in the streets? Well, I thought about that a lot when I got in the streets from Occupy Chicago early on, and you know, I'd basically been hopeless my whole life. You know, I'd just, you know, being confronted with different things, I'd think to myself, oh, well, this is BS, you know, for this or that reason. Right. You know, there's lots of contradictions here. Stuff just isn't working the way they say it is. But I wasn't really active until I saw kind of like this big focus of energy, you know, of creative energy for change, for positive change, and then, you know, I wanted to go and be a part of that. So part of it is like momentum, you know, that like spark, that fire, but part of it I think also what Occupy had going for it was this big tent thing where it was like, okay, we need to come together and, you know, all issues are on the table, you know, and we're all equal and we're all in it for the same reasons. We were held together less by, you know, one ideology, one paradigm, one dogma. We were held together by, instead, the belief that was, you know, like universal that, you know, this isn't working and we have to come together, you know, to work to create a change that will benefit us all. So there was a commonality in that, and you know, people have their own experiences, and they have to be allowed to participate in their own ways that they find effective, and you have to allow for that. You have to build a space where multiple people from different experiences can come together, and and there's also that element of magic, or, you know, lightning in a bottle, something like that too.
The flash in the pan is, you know, to get people's attention. I think Occupy kind of proved to me some good and some bad things. The good was that there were a lot of people who were willing to come out without assurance of much of anything. They just felt...
I think the assurance was that there was a potential for a change that would matter. Because why doesn't someone, you know, go to this meeting or that meeting? There's 100 meetings every day. Why don't more people go to them? Because they don't think that meeting is going to accomplish anything.
Where I'm going is that, and this is, I think, one of the bad things that Occupy revealed, which was the distance between the you know, average citizen, working class person culture, to our long history of resistance and resilience in the face of, you know, a highly leveraged or outside power or intruder onto our personal lives, onto, you know, our communities. And
most of our lives are artificial. I mean, they're totally constructs of outside forces.
Right, and it was very telling to me that people stood around with their hands on their sides and said, well, what are they asking for? Who's the leadership? Blah, 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 blah.
What's your one issue?
You want to see a nonviolent revolutionary movement come into fruition, take shape, and deliver the goods with all the philosophy and everything within 6 months' time? Stop watching TV, except for our show. But regardless,
which they can watch online.
Right. I thought that was really interesting because from my vantage point, Occupy was just simply... It was a step in the process. It was creating the space and the venue for people to come forth and try to work together in the form of direct democracy, which is something that we do not have here, that we need to, you know, revisit.
Exactly.
Because when we don't, we have groups like ALEC, which we're discussing, or we'll be discussing again, that take shape and try to take over the trajectory of policy from us. But, you know, people were coming together with a very, very diverse set of political beliefs and everything else, but they were finding that space. They were coming, they were laying out the grievances, they were working together.
Some of them were finding home and purpose.
And that was a really good thing. Now, of course, you know, you have the peanut gallery, I'm going to call them that, and I'm sorry, but it's, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've had to listen to this, well, what did they accomplish? They're dead. They didn't do anything. What were they? What did they want? What do they want? You know what? One thing they did accomplish was every like reactionary jag could hop in their pickup truck and drive by and throw out you know, job applications to McDonald's. Say, get a job, you hippie! Like, it gave us guys something to do. That's good, right? Anyway,
jerks need something to do.
Oh man.
So, no, forget about direct democracy. I'll take my orders from ALEC.
Yeah, direct democracy. I mean, well, that's something our nation has never had. You know, we're a republic, but it was definitely a founding principle of Occupy. You know, anyone, you know, Occupy Wall Street started. Anyone, you know, there's nothing stopping anyone from, you know, starting an Occupy in their hometown, wherever that may be. But one of the really core principles, you know, that I think, you know, you'd be kind of illegitimate to call yourself Occupy if you didn't stand by direct democracy, and that to us really clearly means you have open meetings, anyone can go to them, and everyone has an equal say.
Everyone has an equal say.
And everything should be open. You can have, there's ready access to information, and everything that's present in the body politic is accessible to everyone affected by it. I might also use the term radical inclusiveness. If like we had a General Assembly and that's where we would pass resolutions that were supposed to impact the body that was Occupy Chicago, and we sought to be radically inclusive, and what that meant was to get the input of anyone that would be affected by whatever policy we would create in the creation of that policy.
Yeah.
And that's direct democracy.
Right. So we are not a direct democracy in this country. We established that.
A republic, right? In a republic, our elected officials are supposed to represent our interests. We choose people to represent us and carry our interests forward, but instead, we see.
But they are supposed to be elected democratically.
And may I point out,
component to all that.
But in electoral colleges, there's all these caveats.
Yeah, exactly.
And we have the two-party system, which is like it's not in any, it's not in the Constitution. It's not really in the fundamental laws. But the Fair Elections Commission, is anything but. That's just the Democratic and Republican Party, and they have de facto control over all of our elections, essentially.
And to that point, there are people on both sides that acknowledge that representatives are not serving the will of the people. So,
which brings us to ALEC.
Which brings us exactly to
the
ALEC.
evidence of that is, Pew. I love Pew Research polls, Pew Trust. They have all these polls, and they find that 80% of Americans agree that we need higher taxes on the wealthy and corporations. We need a better healthcare system and insurance system, whether that's universal payer or something
disagrees.
else. Right, but 80% of Americans agree. 80% of Americans agree we should not be locking anyone up for nonviolent drug possession charges.
And who's partying at the Palmer House in Chicago with champagne and hot tubs and all that other stuff with our elected officials?
80% of Americans agree we should not be starting more wars in the Middle East, and we should be withdrawing
troops. I wanted to talk about the numbers. That's a brilliant point, and I wanted to talk about numbers a little bit because we had a conversation during the ALEC conference back in August with our buddy, our right-wing buddy, Dwayne Lester. Dwayne buddy, who really didn't want to tell us what he was all about.
I'm just interested.
But Dwayne was out there.
Mr. Blogger.
He was a Breitbart vlogger or something.
Well,
like that?
I'm not sure if he's Breitbart.
I don't know if he's directly related to Breitbart, but he definitely had an agenda beyond just the casual observer.
I saw one video. If it was his, he edited it.
There was an observer that
disingenuously.
That's putting it nice.
There was a video that we put up that had Mr. Lester on it, in which we highlighted the thought that he was more than just a casual
more than just asking questions.
You made a video about this? I don't think I've seen that.
I did. Yeah, that's at revolutionandbeer.com that people can catch it. They can catch it on YouTube too. Just by Googling.
What should I look for?
Revolution and Beer.
That specific video.
That specific video will come right up.
It was tagged ALEC right wing. And anyway, we'll get you the information about it.
I'll check it out.
But we had a conversation, and it was sort of this back and forth semantic argument regarding: are we a constitutional? Are we a democratic republic? Are we a that sort of game that people like to play with, with politics. The reality is that people like that, like to play the game. When the majority of Americans believe a certain way, suddenly we're a constitutional republic. When the majority of people say believe in something that might lean towards a right-wing talking point, suddenly we're a democcy.
Right.
So they sort of waffle in between these things. And so I just wanted to bring that point up that it should be about. It should be about what Americans want, and that lean towards democracy. Now, obviously, there's some caveats there about if the majority of Americans wanted to discriminate against African Americans or immigrants or a particular minority or what have you, there are some issues there. So there's a balance.
Well, there's been maybe more discrimination in the last 10 years than
ever before.
than in Martin Luther King's time.
Agreed.
I mean, the FBI in 2005 was reporting that 80% of mortgage fraud was on behalf of the lenders.
Yeah.
So since 2005, and it's only increased every single year since then, 2006, 2007.
But I think it's important to make that distinction about the use of numbers and the use of terms.
But those people, those like right-wing rabble-rousers, they presented this narrative that got picked up by the mainstream, in Congress on the floor and in every media outlet, that it was poor black people who were irresponsible that took out mortgages that they shouldn't have taken, and that they were too irresponsible to pay them, that totally crashed the economy. Right?
It wasn't derivatives.
I mean, that's straight out of Goebbels and Hitler's playbook, right? Like, what did Hitler say? This is the definition of propaganda. Tell a big enough lie and repeat it. That's what Hitler said.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what we see.
He just didn't have CNN, MSNBC.
The truth is, even with Obama in office, 80% of black wealth in America has been wiped out in the last 10 years through a legal foreclosure crisis. The banks in 2003 refinanced over 85% of all mortgages in America into adjustable rate loans, which are dependent on the interest rate changing. And they rigged the interest rates. The LIBOR scandal in England was not unique to England. There are cables and records of phone calls and emails from the Federal Reserve to the different member banks in America. These are private commercial banks, and they fixed the interest rates. So if you took out a loan for a mortgage, you signed a contract that said that your loan is liable, is subject to change based on the market interest rate. But the banks illegally colluded in a cartel manner to change that interest rate to get you kicked out of your home. And that has not been addressed in any sense by the Justice Department of the United States. The only thing they've looked at were the robocalling foreclosures, because the banks couldn't prove that they owned the homes anymore after they'd been packaged and resold. But they have not even looked at the fact that every single ballooning rate mortgage, mortgage-backed security, adjustable rate mortgage was subject to a racketeering price fix by the shadow banking cartel.
And we've seen that. We've seen that in dramatic fashion. Well, people who wish to see it, we've seen that in dramatic fashion, particularly in Chicago here, on the south side of Chicago, Inglewood and Woodlawn and Bronzeville.
That's how schools are paid for. Schools are paid for by property taxes. We had 40 years ago. We had
decimated.
40 years ago, the owners in Chicago, signed agreements with each other not to rent or sell to black people, right? And today we have illegal redlining. Penny Pritzker was on the Board of Education in Chicago. Her sister,
she's a sweetheart.
Her sister, was found guilty in a civil suit of being racist against black people taking out mortgages. Her sister owns, a credit bureau, and they're involved in mortgages, etc. Meanwhile, she got public funds to build a Hyatt hotel for free, and she's getting
$3 million.
$5.2 million.
$5.2 million. Thank you.
To finance $21 million in bonds. Right, to build a hotel. Hyatt paid $0.
She doesn't have a marketing department that would already figure out if that was a viable business location. And absolutely.
Exactly.
If you want capital, get into those TIFs.
But that's absolutely true, and it's those communities that have. It's easy to say, well, the black communities, and why are we giving loans to black? These people are poor. They don't have the money. They couldn't pay them back.
Why do we take them out?
But it's those communities. First of all, we go back to the Bush administration, in which they were applauding themselves for the highest rate of home ownership during this whole arc of.
The loan officers were getting commissions of up to $10,000 for each loan that they made.
Precisely.
And what they were doing was forging signatures, or they would get a signature and then they would Xerox it and make up new loan amounts. They would say this person is making $1 million a year, and their loan is for $30 million.
And these are the communities.
And these are people living in Englewood, or
precisely. But these have been the communities that have been historically underrepresented, have been historically abused, overlooked, ignored.
The American manufacturing base is in private for-profit prisons.
So they were going to be the communities that were going to be hit hardest first.
Beat the new slavery. It's the same as the old slavery.
Yeah. So they were able. So it's easy for them, in a cartoonish way, to make the case that when these communities, which have historically been held behind other communities, when they get hit hardest, it's easy for them to say, well, these people couldn't pay back their loans, so no wonder.
To blame the person, yeah.
Exactly.
At least during the old slavery, you got to work outdoors, though. Right?
Yeah, you maybe got to keep a little private garden to yourself, you know?
Yeah.
But you don't have that anymore. Yeah. Nobody has their own land. You know, we're all in debt.
Yeah.
Tremendously. You know, household debt in America is well over 100%, has been for years, well over 100%. And, you know, the thing is, everything going on with homes, that's the funding for schools.
Yeah.
Right? That's 100% the funding for schools.
That's
and
communities.
in Chicago,
it's the anchor for communities. And,
exactly,
and the schools that have been closed in this community are largely in communities that have really been devastated by the homes.
Exactly.
The vast majority of schools closed in Chicago, you know, 54 public schools closed, the most ever in the history of public policy. Only Katrina, Hurricane Katrina is the only thing that can compare to the school closing in Chicago. And most of those schools were over 90% African American and very poor communities.
Surprisingly.
Absolute disregard.
CPS put out a call for private charter contractors to submit proposals to them to get millions of dollars from them, saying that they now have overcrowded schools and need to open new schools right after they closed schools, saying that they had no money.
What I didn't want to say is we're coming up to the end of our show, and I'm holding the magic key here. Stay tuned. The credits we post, we're going to have all of our contact information, everything, everything that we're talking about, so for people to get connected. We also want to hear from you guys. It's important. We need to be a community. We need to be together on this because this is affecting us. And then you'll find out about the beer we're drinking too, which is, you know, just icing on the cake.
Pretty good. Yeah, it is.
I monitor the comment feeds on the website, and as much as I love some of the creativity that comes across, like the spam stuff, like seriously, I would love to find some good comments in there sometimes. We've had some good ones.
But the last couple of seconds here, check us out at revolutionandbeer.com. Like us at Revolution and Beer on Facebook. But I really wanted to thank our guests. We blew through another half hour.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
But cheers, guys. Here's to the holidays.
65.
All right. We'll see you again on the next Revolution and Beer show. We're going to go lay down, take a nap. And finish our beer. But again, check us out at revolutionandbeer.com and Revolution and Beer on Facebook.
Now you'll smell it.
We will. I will. But that's all right. I like it. It's actually my cologne.
Do your shoes smell like beer?
We'll see you next week. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the catalyst. I'm waiting for the change, 'cause it's gonna come. Yeah, it's gonna come. They can say only for years, for years and years and years, for years and years and years, and I'm so caught up on it. I'm so